Hello and welcome to the Delirium engine, where we make little tiny mistakes at the beginning of the episode and then have to restart it multiple times. Today I'm with my good friend the Spartan, and we are here discussing Enter Session, or we're completing the series Enter Session. It's not completely done. We got about 4 more episodes to go, including this one.
Yeah.
But we're working on that.
Getting there.
So as you may know, Enter Session is where we discuss the parts of a GM session/scenario and discover what makes each part the most successful with the least effort. Emphasizing the least effort. Having said that, I would have to say that our next topic of discussion, last week we did the trail, a roadmap of pain, and this week we are doing...
Wow.
Drum roll, please. Barriers, both visible and invisible.
Let's be fair, it was a few weeks ago. Not necessarily last week.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So my computer died and people getting sick. And, speaking of sickness, Mr. Dagwood's not here because he's dying of mega AIDS.
As you do.
Yeah. I don't know. I think he got a cold. There's a flu going around, so people are getting sick.
Yep.
Yeah, and my hard drive crashed, and so excuses. Throw some more excuses. Deflect responsibility. All those other good things that people do.
Perfect.
Yeah, beautiful. But with that said, let's just jump right into it.
Yep, feet first.
So full disclosure, I don't quite know how we're going to structure this episode, because usually what we do is I discuss how I do the thing we're discussing in the games that I make. And I don't do it consciously at all. At all. And it's probably, the barriers question is probably my most... my weakest area as a GM, I think. Probably. Because I like to create barriers that are far too large, or I create barriers that are way too... Well, I wouldn't say way too easy. It's very seldom that the barriers are way too easy. They always are quite daunting. Or, I guess that could be too easy. It's like... I don't know. I never feel that way. And I always feel like my players don't ever feel like they're not challenged enough. Like
yeah, no, I can't really think of anywhere it was really freaking easy.
Where you're just like, man, this is a joke. It's, even when it is easy, there's always a threat of hardship just around the corner. Enough to make everything seem like a stressful trial.
Yeah.
So I can't really claim to say that I really know how to do it properly. So what I guess we can do is I can discuss in theory what I do subconsciously, and then we'll bounce it off of you, Mr. the Spartan.
Right.
And then you can discuss both as a GM or as a player, sort of what you experience as like the best and the worst kind of barriers. And then perhaps we'll try to sort of tease out both the question and the answer.
Okay.
How do we create these barriers with the least amount of effort? Honestly, the least amount of effort thing is don't worry about it.
Yeah. Just
everything will build itself. But I'm sure there are times for every GM where they don't want their players going to the last boss right away. So you have to erect these barriers. So, subconsciously speaking, so the barriers I erect. If you guys have ever watched the show, you'll know that in the rules for GMs, impossible barriers are a no-no. So I never do it. Like, the only impossible barriers that exist are the barriers of reality, right? And even then, that's sometimes a little bit, they wax and wane.
Yeah,
where they
does
can go.
funky things.
Yeah, magic is a wild ride. And so, barring magic, though, like with the exception of magic, I don't ever make a barrier that the PCs can't cross. But let's take, say, one of the last games I ran with the Flotissima Empire, which is like a fascist group of squid monsters, and I know it's one you're familiar with because you were playing in it, so we can have the discussion about it.
The Future Foundation.
You know, the Flotissima Empire was like Generalissimo Flotissima, which was the name of the Führer.
Yeah.
They're flying cuttlefish people. Whatever, doesn't matter. It was a great name, and I was really excited about it.
No, it was good.
Yeah. People never thought that he was a walk in the park. Like, maybe he personally was like easy to beat, but getting to him was always difficult. So you know, even though I didn't write a single thing about what stands between the PCs and Generalissimo, with the exception of, say, an army. You know, like a nation state stands between you and them.
That's a pretty big thing.
Yeah, but that's really vague.
True.
Like, what does a nation state mean? Like, you know, Gaviello Principe can just walk up to a guy and shoot him, you know?
Well, yeah, but this is, from what I can remember you saying, it's essentially Nazi Germany. Or no, it was Nazi Italy.
And fascist Italy.
Fascist Italy.
It was modeled over after fascist Italy in Germany.
So you got, like, secret police. The whole thing is basically a big police state.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff to bar ways.
Yeah, and then there was a water barrier, I guess, because geographically, like you know, talking about the environment, you know, geographically they were on an island and in a floating castle, so you had to somehow find your way into the floating castle. Like, it was pretty difficult to just take his ass down.
Yeah.
But it wasn't impossible because one of the PCs essentially did that. Like, they didn't kill the Generalissimo, but the one character, Josh's character, he didn't get into Fortress Attican.
No, he didn't.
But he did get into the other the flying fortress base. He just basically walked on and said he's a visitor.
Yeah.
And then he made friends with the librarian, and like everything went his way. He just walked right in. Like this for every other PC, this barrier was impossible. Like, they were just like, we're never going to get onto that ship.
Because we weren't going at it as a visitor. We were going at it as a mercenary team designed to fucking murder people.
But
sorry for the swear.
No, but that's right. Like, and so that was my point. Like, these barriers were never impossible. Like, you know, you can just roll with it. But you know, you put up the environmental. You keep a mind out for your environment, and you just sort of let realism guide you. And yeah, this is a nation state. It wasn't it was oppressive in that it was like a totalitarian state, but like people could come on to the government buildings, and so that's what this guy did. And in fact, he came on. He wasn't even lying, really. He just basically said he's from that rival nation and he's here to pick up that dead body because there was a dead body. That was one of the sort of quest points, I guess.
Yeah.
Is they were trying to pick up the dead bodies of like these sort of pretty higher ups in their organization. And so they were like, okay, we'll sign this paperwork and yada yada yada, and we'll make sure that you get there because we don't want you doing anything funky. And then he did. He just left. The game for him was like in and out. Like, there was no...
Yeah, no, he came in, did his thing, and left.
And everybody was like, where did he go? Because, of course, he never told the party what he was doing. He just decided one day he was just going to go do that. And
yeah, I'm pretty sure he walked out
I think
a
he sent
window.
a note from home, like in, you know, another country, basically saying, got what I wanted, guys, have a good one.
Yeah.
I'll manage things from here. But yeah,
Jesus.
But no, okay, so taking the Generalissimo into account, thinking about him, you know, I don't want people killing the Generalissimo. So, like, the barriers that I've erected, though, around him are just... They're not hard barriers. Every barrier is a soft barrier. And I guess that would be where I would say it's like the difference between hard barriers and soft barriers would be a hard barrier is one you've literally written down and you're just like, you know, there's a wall between you and him and you are not going to penetrate that wall because it's made of magic goober stone. Whereas a soft barrier would be just something you don't write down at all. You're just like, yeah, there's going to be walls.
I wouldn't say so. I don't agree.
What do you mean?
Well, because the whole thing that came down on us was that we're all death machines, but we're not quiet. Like, your soft barriers became hard barriers from us because we have no stealth qualities.
Well,
like,
yeah, but
we needed a stealth character. For a stealth character, it would have been a soft barrier, but because we had no talents towards it, it was a hard barrier for us.
yeah, but
We can't just walk in
But
there.
the
It's
one-
an
the one guy just
army. It's
walked
a
in.
fortress.
well, that's fine. and you
Yeah,
can
but he's
figure it out.
walking in to get the people. We were walking in to kick them out of town, basically. Well, one
Yeah,
of us
well,
wanted
but
to
I didn't
anyway.
write like when I say a soft versus a hard barrier is like, you know, I literally codified the barrier. Like I said that this is this wall has 10,000 hit points, and you're not going to take down that wall with just a sword swipe. You know, a soft barrier. When I say soft, I mean like it's not codified. So it's like we have a pretty good idea that there's going to be walls between you and him because he lives in a building. You know, there's probably going to be some guards. I have a pretty good idea that there's some guards between you and the Generalissimo. You know, what kind of guards? I don't know. Like, is it going to be like 20 anti-aircraft turrets pointed directly at the party as soon as they step into the room? Probably not.
Yeah, no, okay.
Like,
Okay.
that's what I mean. Like, yeah, you guys spec'd your characters in a certain way, and then when it came time, you realized that being sneaky might have been easier at that given time. But,
Well-
you know, when your party got total, like, if your party would have got total party wiped because you were all so sneaky and then got found out in that one room, like the one theoretical room that you finally got found out in, and like the three soldiers with guns showed up and just went blam 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 blam, and you all died. You know, you'd have been like, that's a pretty hard barrier too. It's like, yeah, you're bad at things you're bad at,
Yeah.
which I guess is a thing, a piece of knowledge to take home from there too, right? Like, so if you as the GM have an idea of what the party is supposed to be doing, and in my case, the party had decided what they wanted to do in the pregame, so you know we had a pretty relatively okay idea of what was going on. Actually, that game was an interesting one because you guys wanted to be like, originally you wanted to be like UN peacekeepers
Yeah.
and like charity workers, which is what like the Freedom Foundation was supposed to be. It's like you go in and you're helping people, like the goat quests, like that, because we had like 2 concurrent quests in that game.
Yeah.
Where there was like the game that everyone's actually playing, which is like the Flotissima Empire, and like trying to acquire and destroy this sort of weird mind control weapon that they're rumored to have called the Elithiad.
Yeah.
And then this other quest, which was the original first session of the original game, which was the Goat Quest, which was basically like this small goblin village somewhere out there. You know, something was killing all of its goats, and they were starving. Like this whole area was starving, and it was starting to turn into a crisis because there was like raiders. So you guys as peacekeepers would have to come in and stop the raiders and help these guys bring in some goats, make sure that the goat, like, basically you guys were supposed to be like, you know, stay and rebuild kind of troopers,
Okay.
right? Like you were supposed to be peacekeepers, but you guys said no. You want to be like spec ops, super cool spec ops. You know, not quite ultra violence, but you know, combat oriented, not about, you know, negotiating with people and things like that.
Well, to be fair, we didn't have any negotiators.
No, you had 0. Literally no negotiators.
We basically, everybody made frontline combat people except for one person who made a slightly stealthy person, and then she like never showed up after the second game.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the thief, the rogue, or sorry, she's an assassin.
Yeah.
Or whatever the joke was, because that's always what she said was like, I'm an assassin because I'm an assassin. I'm sneaky because I'm an assassin.
Yeah.
And then yeah, all sorts of fun stuff like that. It was good. She was a good character. She was fun. She did a lot of stuff. She affected the game a lot too. Like she would actually go on and do things, and those things would bite everybody in the butt, but it was still good. She ended up starting like an assassination school, and then the assassination school turned on the party.
Didn't she get hired by the assassination school?
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, she decided, she went incognito as like a trainer for this assassination school because they were looking for like because they were just starting out, and they were supposed to be fairly cringy as like a secret police force. Like they don't have any experience, so they were looking for experienced soldiers to teach them how to become good at what they do. And it just happened that someone from the force of people that they were trying to, build themselves to defeat, decided to start training them. And then when they found out about it, it became
an issue.
Bad times, and you had to deal with that smiling little guy and all those other jerkwads in that group.
Oh, that's where they came from.
Yeah, that was those guys.
Oh.
The smiling guy. I think he got serial killed by the guy who was playing the female, like the paladin who was basically Dexter.
Yeah.
She wasn't actually a paladin. She just pretended to be.
Just wanted to kill people.
Yeah, and use her cover as like a combat Palladia medic. Yeah, it was kind of a fun game.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, getting back to the idea of these barriers, like these soft versus hard barriers. Maybe that's not the right approach. Like, that's just you writing notes about the environment and not statting everything up. That's just putting minimal effort in. Like, the barriers are still barriers. Like, he lives in a castle. Well, that's a pretty big barrier. Yeah. Sometimes. Like, that's basically saying he lives in a dungeon that you have to delve through the dungeon. And he has lots of rooms to notice and get away. Like,
yeah.
Nation state might be even bigger, but it might also not be. Like, it's just a different scenario.
Well, I could think of a few ways to, like, deal with that barrier quite easily, but it ranges in how much what your PCs are spec'd out to be and how much power they have at their back, really.
Yeah, that's true. Like, well, your barriers are like, you can erect strong, tall barriers. Like a goblin barring the way is different than a deity barring the way.
Yeah.
So, as long as you're realistic with the barrier, I guess. Like I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly here. Because you're trying to produce barriers that aren't too difficult. So you don't want to produce ones that are like impossible, but you do sometimes have to. So I guess you would try not to, when you're building the barriers, build them with the environment you've created. Don't build them to guide your players in a certain direction. Your barriers are not fences that are like used to goat trail your party to where you want to go. These barriers are going to be organically produced by your environment. Like the image I'm seeing in my head is like, you have the map of your city, right?
Yeah.
And you will like the barriers. You'll probably never write any of these barriers down. Unless you have to stat a monster or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But you'll just write notes about almost everything. And this is where the great secret of the Enter Session series seems to be just take some rough notes. and you could probably figure most of it out. And if you do need stats, do stats. But in this particular case, it's like even rough notes are not necessary. Because to do it with the minimal amount of effort is, once again, just keeping in mind that your barriers are going to be organic based on what you've already written in your environment. And your environment, in theory, was going to make sense in the first place, right? So if the PCs happen to be on a goat trail with sheer walls, and the walls have spikes, and there's T-Rexes roaming around behind the walls, just in case you tried to climb over them, that's the environment you produced, right? And the walls, obviously, for them to leave that trail, are pretty severe.
Yeah, it's a bit dangerous.
But those barriers that you've put up, in theory, in that environment, are realistic. So, like, contrastingly speaking, they're walking on your trail, and your barriers are invisible, and they walk off the trail, and one of those T-Rexes shows up randomly and starts trying to kill the PCs until they run back onto the trail. Like, that's the old trope, the story T-Rex will show up and try to chomp you back onto trail. This is obviously not what you want. So, and that's obvious. That's extremely inorganic.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna do something inorganic like that, there has to be a justification. Like the PCs might not perceive it as inorganic, or as organic, but it might actually be. For example, like say there's an illusionist or something that's trying to waylay them and guide them to a trap. Every time they go where the illusionist doesn't want to go, some fucking illusionary T-Rex will show up and just bomb. So they run back onto the path, and the T-Rex looks at them and rocks away, and that illusionist is doing a good job, and they all fall into a pit trap or something. Yeah. Who knows, whatever. But once again, like even if the PCs didn't realize it's organic, you could make it organic.
Yeah.
And I think that's the secret of the barriers thing, is to make sure it's organic and make sure that the things you put in are make sense within the environment or whatever. Okay, so I think with that part covered, like this idea of like what kind of barriers we should put up, do you have anything you'd like to add? Because I do have another point to move on to.
No, I don't really have anything. I don't think you should railroad your players though, like the whole plot T-Rex thing. No, I don't think it's a good idea.
No, it's in the rules for GMs that it's a shit idea, right? Yeah, but that's intercession isn't the rules for GMs or the rules for players or anything like that. So we're not trying to say what's good and what's a bad idea. I guess what we're trying to do is how to produce it the best kind of barriers with the least amount of effort. And I'll say the best kind of barriers are ones that are organic, that make sense, that PCs can make a spot check and see. You know what I mean? Like the PCs can interact with the environment by asking questions, and they know that the barriers exist. Like surprise motherfucker kind of barriers coming out of nowhere and just destroying and or railroading the PCs is not fun. Like people don't like it. It's no good. They're not good barriers.
Yeah.
Magical invisible. Like when you're playing a video game and you encounter an invisible wall in the direction you wanted to go, and you literally can't go there anymore, like for no reason. This is frustrating. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably the analogy that we would be talking about here. Don't have those. And there's no reason why. You're playing Dungeons and Dragons. There should be no invisible walls. All right.
Unless there's an invisible barrier magically made.
Yeah, unless there is, for some reason, an actual invisible barrier.
Yeah.
Right?
But that goes back to the organic thing.
Yeah, but then that's organic. Like, you've justified it, and it's organic. Right? Now, this leads to the point that I want to get to.
Yeah.
Because this is the part where we start discussing when you're producing these barriers, how big should they be, and when should I have bigger barriers and when should I have small barriers? And let's take for granted that organically speaking, any barrier should meet the organic, like what the environment dictates that barrier should be.
Yeah.
But like you as a GM now are putting additional barriers in the path, on the trail, right? That roadmap of pain.
Okay.
So we're putting these barriers in, there's, so imagine we have a town, and the town is filled with peaceful people. And now you're going to fill it with a barrier. And that barrier is going to be bandits. Okay. All right? When your PCs walk in, there's going to be bandits. How do we erect the barriers, the bandit barriers, in a way that the PCs will enjoy the game? So, for example, a bad erection of these barriers would be PCs walk into town square, the entire, almost like if you've ever played an old Fallout game or something, where it's like random encounter, 5 guys with SMGs, your spear is useless against them, they kill you, reload game.
Yeah. That's right.
That's a bad barrier.
That's very bad.
So, and this would be the case where it's like the PCs walk into town and the gang turns around, all 200 of them with their, crossbows, SMGs, whatever setting you're in, phasers set to kill. And they all look at you and say, "We don't like outsiders. Kill them, boys." This game is like a hardcore PvP style Rust game or something where you just you step down of your spawn point and are shot in the head by some 5-year-old.
Oh God. Yeah, no, that's a 5-mile barrier. You
so,
don't.
So yeah.
No.
So there's obviously an answer to be had here because there's something that you can do wrong.
Yeah.
So there must be a correct way to do it. And once again, maybe this is where you need to take your barriers that you're erecting into your plot here, and you have to filter them through your environment. So for the example, like this group of, imagine, if you will, there's a couple ways to do this. Let's use the same example with the town and the gang. Okay, 200 guys in this gang. They're in this town. It's a fairly small town, and you would walk in like with your giant barriers. That 200 gang. You walk into town. Boom. You see them immediately. They see you immediately. They shoot you. You die. That's your barrier. You lose. Okay. One way to do this is take into account sort of the environment. Turn the gang, a 200 strong group of gang members, turn them into a piece of the environment, and as the PCs approach, you're lowering this barrier by making the gang make noise, giving the PCs a sense of what they're walking into. So sometimes they randomly shoot their SMGs into the air, or their phasers set to kill, or you hear people begging and crying, please stop, it's whatever, who knows what's going on. Fires are in the distance. You've warned the PCs that there's a problem, so your barrier is now smaller.
Yeah.
Because it's not surprise, motherfucker. Dead.
Yeah.
So you've warned them. So there's one way to do it, and you could set the warnings real high, where it's just like you feel a sense of impending doom as you walk into this town. Like you are going to lose if you walk in.
Yeah.
Or the other one could be you can disperse them through the environment. So like this gang of 200 people aren't always going to be in the town square at all times. Like if for whatever reason in your GMing you've decided that they are, for whatever reason, having a rally and the PCs are going to walk in on this rally, the way to lower that barrier to make it appropriate is to basically give them a hoot and holler, and you hear like the megaphone, or like the loud yelling and people cheering and things like that, and who knows what. Right? Or you've put visual aids like people hung up on pikes,
smoke
towers in the distance, who knows what.
Yeah.
But like something to tell the PCs that this is the danger zone, and to like I said, soften the blow.
Yeah.
Right? But like I said, the other way would be to disperse them in amongst the town, right? So these gangers run the town. They're not having a rally, but some are at the bar, some are at the inn, some are in the sewers, some are here. It's like 200 guys are in and around the place. Some patrol the walls. Some are out on scouting missions. So when the PCs walk into town, if the gangers are immediately hostile, they only have to deal with 4 or 5, and they can either choose to run or whatever, and then they'll trickle in more and more and more. Or they'll be treated like a weird hostage situation. Like stuff can start happening. The barriers can start being erected around them almost organically from what was once a giant barrier, right? So like you've killed 5 guys and you're holed up in the inn, and all the other guys don't want to come into the inn because you're dangerous. Now you're dangerous and they're scared of you, or they rush in, you kill those guys too because there's only 10 of them. Or like all of them start rushing in and they start guarding places, and you guys just escape and you go just start doing guerrilla shit, or who knows what. Like whatever. Could be anything. But once again, that you've turned that one enormous barrier, the terrible barrier, into a series of small barriers, but you've filtered it through your environment.
Yeah.
So like when we discuss the trail and sort of what you put on there, you would put like, this city is infested by bandits. And in your environment, you would start, write some notes about where the bandits are. And that's the barrier you're erecting. You've erected this barrier, and those notes that you've taken about how they've dispersed in the environment, or what sort of warnings you're giving the players to disperse, like the if they're in a rally, to disperse that barrier. And this would work in a dungeon-y kind of situation too, where it's like, there's an instant death trap. So it's like you keep stepping on bones, constantly cracking. Or like even more insidious. It's like the dungeon is dusty, and then the dungeon is extremely clean right now, to the point where it's unnaturally clean.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm gonna be like, why? What is going on? And maybe that's because there's like a disintegration cap with a nice little gust of wind that blows all the dust into a nice little, some weird Gygax style horror show of a dungeon where you're walking down an aisle and like a little laser beam shoots you, you turn into dust, and a nice wind blows you into a gutter where you're sent away. The dungeon is beautifully clean in this part. Like, yeah, all sorts of stuff like that, and in your really difficult things should probably be diffused with descriptions of sort of after effects of these really difficult things. Something to give the PCs a warning. Because if they walk into a wall and they don't know that there was a wall there in the first place, it's extremely frustrating. So I guess that would be part of the takeaway knowledge. Make sure your barriers are visible. Make sure your barriers...
even when they're not.
Even when they're not visible, make sure that they're visible. Make sure that they make sense within the environment.
Yep.
And if they don't make sense with the environment immediately, somehow they have to, the PCs will figure it out. Or if they don't figure it out, well, too bad for them. They're all dead. Who cares? But like the point is...
Well, I think they care, to be fair.
Yeah, to be fair. That's true. That is true. But even then, if they don't get to see it, there should be some sort of warning. Mm-hmm. Some sort of warning, and the warning can't... You really shouldn't make the warning the PCs ask you if there's anything going on. Like, you have to be proactive in this as well. Like, you have to inform them that something is happening. Something they should take note of.
Yeah.
For example, in the game that I played with Swampy yesterday. We went into a dungeon, like a tower of this warlock's tower. And he's like, yeah, everything's made of glass. Like the floors look like there's glass. It's made of glass, and like there's.
So you can just see through it.
Or
is it like opaque? Or?
It's opaque. I think he was saying it's like mirrors too.
Okay.
And so as you're walking through, he starts talking about the torches and how the torches, the lit torches, are creating a smoky smell in the area. So you're like, I see. And then like you start realizing this is like a wooden tower, and. Yeah, what ends up happening if you went too far, he dropped a bunch of like just logs got dropped to bar your way, and then the logs are covered in oil, and they set the whole place on fire.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's real neat.
Yeah, and then there were like glass pit traps, so if you're too heavy, because it was built for a goblin. Oh. So like if you're a human in armor or something like that, and you're too heavy, you'll fall onto a pit of burning spikes. And then there's a bunch of undead on fire whose entire job is to hug you. Like it was bad. We didn't fall into that, but like we almost did. And it was all mirrors, so that like the warlock could deflect spells off the mirrors to hit you while you're running through a mirror maze.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty elaborate.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great, but he went really easy on us, actually, because we had just finished fighting like a major encounter with a really powerful fighter, and we just defeated him, and we were all really weak, and we didn't really have a healer and things like that, and we were really low on health, and if we had to fight that warlock, because he was an old PC...
Yeah.
And if we had to actually fight the warlock as a warlock and not as just like a shitty goblin who was an asshole,
things could have went real bad.
No, we would have been dead. It was just straight up dead. Because the warrior was like a 20th level warrior, and we took him out. Like we beat him. Because we're all like level 10 or 12, and there's a bunch of us, right? So we got him.
We banded together and
we got him.
The big bad.
But we were not feeling very good about it.
Okay.
And so this was like a 15th, 20th level warlock in his tower. Everything's built from the ground up to make it so that your life is miserable. And the only thing he actually did to us was like he dropped a vial of oil on us when we were climbing up a rickety ladder trying to get to the top floor while we were chasing him. and he dropped oil on us and dropped a lantern on us.
Oh.
I'm just like, yeah. And like he could have just as easily cast like Vampiric Touch and just instantly killed me, because I had like 35 hit points left. I would have died.
Yeah.
And then I would have fallen on all the other PCs, and they would have burned to death, and he would have flown away on his giant flying fly.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of brings up another point. Like, you have to keep in mind your PCs.
Yeah.
When they encounter the barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as you said, you guys are all beat to shit.
Yeah, well,
right?
But we could have run.
True.
I chose not to run because I'm a goober. And it worked out again, because it usually does. But it could have, if I was running the game and not Swampy, it wouldn't have worked out. We would have died. But we wouldn't have had to go into the dungeon in the first place. Because if I was the GM, I would have had the goblin talk to us. Like, we would have fought the 20th level warrior, and then the goblin would have talked to us. And then if the goblin didn't like our questions and our answers, he'd have told us to fuck off. And if we were trying to chase him down, then it would have been Death Town.
Hmm.
And it was a gnoll encampment. We hadn't killed all the gnolls. They're just sitting there standing around. We just to beat the chieftain. So they're like, okay.
You're big tough
we'll
guy.
watch and see what's going on. And then,
Yeah. All right.
The goblin basically burnt down everybody. we got the goblin and got away, and then we basically made friends with the vampire. Or sorry, the gnoll chieftain, who was also a vampire.
Oh.
PCs, man. PCs get all sorts of weird stuff. Also, he was with like a 17th level warlock. I'm just like, hey, I got Greater Undead. Boom. Because it was old 4th edition characters. So it's just like, oh, here, ritual. I can turn you into a vampire, so now you got cool vampire powers. And he's like, wow, that's really great. That's like gaining 5 levels for nothing.
Yeah.
Here you go. Enjoy. Yeah.
All right. Well, you think of anything else, or?
Well, yeah. Okay. So,
Like,
what were we saying? Yeah. So, diffusing these barriers within the environment. Making sure that if the barriers are substantial enough that they affect the environment in a way that you can diffuse those barriers by creating warnings. Because the PC, I guess the next one would be make sure the PCs can run away unless they can't.
yeah.
And if they can't, let them know that they're basically stepping into a pit. Like that would be the other one. Like you have to let them know. If you want these barriers to be effective and you want your game to be fun, you have to let them know that they're stepping into a death trap. They have to make the choice. Because once you've made the choice, then it's their fault, not yours.
Yeah.
And that's really when you're producing barriers as a GM, you always want everything to be their fault. That's probably
then they can't blame you.
Well, no, because you're never a bad GM if they're the ones who chose the action.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I fought this guy, and I knew exactly what I was getting into, and it didn't work out. Well, that's great, you know. But if it was like, I fought this guy, and I didn't have any clue what this guy was, like, you know, imagine a PC and an NPC at a bar, and the PC's like, buy you a drink, and the guy's like, I hate you and everyone like you. And the guy's like, well, I'm going to fist fight you because you're a jerk, and I'm level 1. And then the guy turns into a Baylor and then slices him in half.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, you know, this is stupid. The
Yeah.
PC would go, that's bullshit. And then you probably lose a player for the rest of your life. Until that guy, you know, maybe the salt stopped. But, like, you didn't expect him to turn into a Baylor in this story because that's retarded.
Yeah.
Right? You expected him to be a jerk with a freaking chip on his shoulder. So, you know, maybe these level 1 parties who are picking fights with random dudes, they picked a fight with the wrong guy. That wrong guy, you know, tears him apart. Doesn't kill him, but, like, beats the shit out of him. Because he's like, maybe he's like a 5th to 10th level guy. He's not wearing any armor, and this guy's a punk, and he's just like, okay, I'm going to teach this punk a lesson.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, that's a legitimate barrier. And you've also warned them, because the guy's like, I don't like your kind. And, like, you know, you've told the PCs, even if it is sort of like on the sly, that this is a guy who's not into you. He doesn't want to deal with your shit. And, you know, he has the audacity to say this. And he doesn't look like he's drunk. He just looks like he doesn't want you to talk to him.
Yeah.
And so you're the one stepping into that den of vipers, right? So, and likewise, you have the PC just fight him, and it's just a fight, right?
Yeah.
And he knows what he's getting into. He's getting into a fight with a guy at a bar. He's not getting into a fight with a guy secretly disguised as a Baylor, ready to like pounce at any time. Like,
Yeah.
I guess if and there's always like exception to these kinds of ideas, but like, you need to warn the player if that's gonna like if you've literally set up a situation where there is a Baylor at the bar, right? And the PCs are a rowdy bunch, you should give them a few hints before. It's like, I'm gonna go pick a fight with that guy at the bar. It's like, as you go closer, you smell sulfur. It's like, okay, warning one, something's a little bit weird.
That's a bit
it's
weird.
Like, the room is warmer around this person. And it's significantly so, to the point where like you step back and it's like 5 degrees cooler. You step forward and it's 5 degrees hotter. This warning.
Yeah.
Something's amiss.
No one's sitting around him.
Yeah.
Like,
The barkeep doesn't ask him if he wants another drink. He just hands him more drinks. There doesn't seem to be any money in his pouch.
yeah.
Like, who knows? Like, all sorts of things. Like, but you dish out enough warnings for the size of the barrier. You obviously don't need these warnings if it's just a drunk.
Yeah.
But like, if the PCs are literally walking into death, that you got to give them a heads up.
Yeah.
Let me see here. So we've covered the walls you see and the walls you don't. How do you put them up on the trail? So I guess that's the next thing, right? We in the trail, we talked about like how you use literary curves, right? So the barriers, in a sense, can almost be like, if you want to think about it in the same format that we've been talking about in the last few episodes, these barriers can be, in a way, set up as well, I'm trying to remember the last episode because it was a couple weeks ago. We were saying that a lot of these barriers, if the PCs have to stop, those barriers become problems because they slow the game down. Like, the trail is all about pacing, right? So the minute you have a combat or a puzzle that's too hard to solve, like these things will kill your pacing.
Yeah.
So the barriers, these barriers are both the increasing tension, like the increasing action, and also things that stop action completely if the barrier is too high. If it's just a hurdle, a series of hurdles, you would keep the tension of the game would continue to progress, right? And the higher the hurdle, the slower you're going to make the pacing of that game. So when you're erecting barriers, you probably want the most difficult ones, at least the ones that don't produce any action, closer to the beginning of the game, where you want your pacing to be slow. Or where, like, you've built your sort of chart if you want to do it with the least effort and actually have an idea of where you want your session to sort of go. But like, those barriers are going to be their most cumbersome. And I'm assuming these are the barriers they have to cross, like to achieve their goal.
Yeah.
They have to be the most cumbersome at the points where you want the least action, the quietest points in the game. The climax is not going to be the most cumbersome barrier. It's going to be probably the easiest barrier. And a last boss is literally the easiest barrier because it's just a fight. Reroll stats and the stats happen. Or it's a timer and we know we're either going to win or we're going to lose. You're not going to encounter a wall. The climax of your session is not going to be a wall that does nothing.
Yeah, no.
And you have to literally dig through it by rolling dice. To roll for damage on the wall. Roll for damage on the wall. The wall still stands. You got the boss music playing, like some weird like Final Fantasy fight music, and you're just like, my pickaxe hits the wall. It takes 50 damage. Oh no! The wall chips. You feel it giving way. 4 hours later of rolling dice against a wall.
You've made a hole the size of your thumb.
Yeah. You're going to be here for a little bit longer, but that's what the action's all about. Welcome to the D&D world. Obviously you wouldn't do that.
No.
So, and this is why a lot of combats, they're really quick, they're sloppy. You can use all sorts of different moves all the time to do all sorts of wacky things, and that's what keeps the excitement high. But they're not difficult barriers. A fight's not difficult. It's actually the most rudimentary type of barrier possible. I don't like you, so I make you go away now.
Yeah.
So the more complex, not even, like, you could even have climaxes be social if they're structured similarly to a combat, right? Where it's like, if you're hurling insults and they're hurling other things, and you realize that, like, the repercussions are for this guy getting a social advantage might be like entire armies will be coming towards your village or something, like, so you have to, like, that's where maybe I don't know. This is off the top of my head, but like it doesn't have to be a figget, just a fight.
Yeah, barriers can be something other than beating the crap out of somebody.
And those the barriers that are like those really small barriers, or they might be insurmountable because you're fighting a god, but it really isn't because it's a fight.
Yeah,
like it's literally a fist fight, and obviously you can win. And if you can't win, then it is an insurmountable barrier, and it's not a climax of a story. It's a dead end. It's you're never gonna have a denouement because the PCs never were gonna get past this point in the story. You'll reach a wall. You'll get about 3 turns in. The party will realize that they can never win, and your climax, like, if that's what you've decided, and your climax of the story is you've reached a wall and the PCs have to realize that they need to retreat and escape, and that's your actual, like, denouement or whatever, is like the god won't chase you down.
Yeah.
You got to run. Then yeah, okay. But
I actually set up a barrier like that not too long ago for the game I'm running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
Little story time.
Yeah, story time's good.
Thing. So I'm running a expeditionary campaign, so I'm not throwing too much, like, fights, right?
Yeah.
So their hurdle to get over was they had to find enough power to defrost these cryopods.
Okay.
In this place they found. And I gave them technically 4 options. They could have just left the place, but the 3 options were to hit the go button on 12% power and hope people survive the not quite the dump shock.
Okay.
Fix one of the other generators that didn't power on, so you'd get full power, and then do a proper run through.
Okay.
Or they could reactivate the main power, like the proper thing. Well, they decided to go with turning on the main power, and it was really easy. Like, they went out into the woods, found the breaker, flipped the switch. There you go. And they did their thing. Well, half of it. But that caused an issue, because nobody looked into where the power comes from.
Yeah.
So they essentially stole a whole bunch of power, powering a ruined city, and the big bad hurdle, like, you can't fight this. You should just stay away from this and find another way around, showed up. And it showed up in the form of a dude in a helicopter with, like, 5 Marines. And one of my PCs started picking a fight with the dude in a suit.
No.
And if I used an NPC to basically be like, no, you don't want to do this. Kept my PC from dying or being enslaved. But yeah, like, she explained it later as to why she did it. She got worked up because she wanted to help the people, and these guys came in and were like, yeah, no, we are way more powerful than you.
Well, nobody likes tyrants, right?
Yeah.
And you've given them tyrants, and because you put, like, one guy with 5 Marines, they go, okay, we could probably take these guys.
Yeah, but they're like full military gear. Everybody in the city is hidden from these guys.
No.
Except
well, but
for
PCs don't care about that.
Well, half the part. No, not even half. Like, there was 4 people, so 3/4 of the party were hidden, like looking around the doorway.
Oh, there's just one guy picking the fight. Nobody was gonna back them up.
Yeah. The only 2 people out there was the leader of the colony, basically to hear what they wanted, and the NPC who decided to walk out there with the leader. And it was never going to be a discussion between 2 people. It was going to be, I'm making demands of you, and if you can't meet them, I'm going to come back and I'm going to take what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that was the hidden repercussion for taking the easy path.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
now they're in a desperate bid to get out before the guys come back and take what they want, because there's no way they can pay that debt.
Oh, there you go. So, yeah, like taking that idea into account, you've created this impossible barrier, but it's not impossible.
No.
They could have just sniper shot, like this was a futuristic sounding game, so they probably could have just sniper shot the guy in the suit, ran away from the Marines, started some sort of weird guerrilla fight, and figured some stuff out, started a rebellion, this would have been a whole campaign.
Yeah.
So it's not like an impossible barrier, but it's like, it is a significant barrier that they can't just go through it like, oh yeah, it's not a hurdle. It's not just something that's real easy. It's like, this is something that you have to disassemble.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to turn it into bite-sized chunks that the party can take down. Well, and a lot of these fights are going to be like that. And actually, that's probably a good sort of point to get to on this too, is sometimes these barriers, like there are like campaign level barriers, and there's like session level barriers, and then there's like just like scene level barriers. So like a scene level barrier would be like, some goblins show up and they're like, give us your money or we'll give you a bunch of bloody guts, and you're just like, oh, this is an interesting scene, I'll just murder these goblins, or I'll give them my money, or whatever you end up doing, because you're a party of players who has certain strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
But like, there's a session sort of level challenge would be, something has struck the village and it requires about 4 hours of playing the game to deal with. And that something is, whatever thing that you brought up with. There's a gang of goblins, not just this little group, but like a gang with like a little warlord. They've come in, they've taken over the town, and they're telling everybody that if they don't give them money, they're going to give them a bunch of bloody guts. So you're like, okay, well, we got to figure out how to take them all down. We can't fight them all at once. There's 200 of them, like in that old example. But, now that they've disseminated around the town, we can find a way to take them apart.
Yeah.
And, and then your campaign level thing would be like the Lich King, some great powerful Lich Lord has, sent a militia of men to the little town, this is your example here. Like, this is a whole campaign to disassemble this Lich Lord, the Overlord, and hell, you might not have, if it's anything like that anime, you're gonna have a rough time of it.
It's not gonna be fun. It will be fun, but hopefully.
Well,
yeah.
I don't think it's fun for any character in that anime who isn't a viewer and or a person who's on the team of the evil Lich Lord. Because every single one of those people end up in a situation where they don't realize how ridiculous their opponent is, because they've never encountered opponents like that ever in existence.
Okay, so it's
they're like that.
It's a tower, and they've never seen towers before.
Yeah, okay. Actually, like Overlord, like that anime that we're talking about. Every single one of those characters, that if it was a GM running that game, and all the other like the NPC characters were PCs,
yeah,
he would be a terrible GM.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, actually, I can see that, except for in the episode where they're in season 3, there's an episode where they send a bunch of workers, which are like parties of adventurers, into the tomb.
Okay.
And with the exception of them getting ambushed and basically saying you're never going to be able to leave, which was what happened to one of the groups. That was like, well, you guys, we'll take a cut of whatever you guys find in the tomb. We're going to go scout around, right?
Yeah.
And so those guys just got ambushed and massacred. But everybody else, like assuming that part didn't exist, if you take that part out, everybody got the warning at the beginning that this tomb is so full of money. Like the first room before you even enter the tomb, like the sort of like little mausoleums around the tomb were so full of cash, and everything in the mausoleum was so valuable that they literally could have just gone to the mausoleum, filled their bags with money, and they would have lived like kings for the rest of their lives.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's a good warning.
Like that's your warning, and there's nothing guarding this. So whatever's in this tomb, if there is a tomb, like if there's something in there, like obviously these guys took it for granted and they thought, oh, there must not be anybody here because this is so much money.
Yeah.
That like you would have the most powerful monsters on the planet guarding this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, no, because the most powerful monsters on the planet, this is trash. It's all trash. And so, but that's the warning. That was your warning. So that's why in that situation it was good.
Yeah.
But most of the rest of the stuff is like, you know, you've got NPCs, like other people encountering these guys, and it's just like, I'm going to finally pick a fight with you. And it's just like, no, you don't know what fight means. And they're like, wait, I've been fighting for like 40 years of my life. It's like, yeah, you've been wasting your time. Yeah, it's brutal.
Had better luck being a farmer.
Yeah, you'd have had better luck being a farmer. At least then we could empathize and not have to kill you instantly.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that anime aside, yeah, it's all about communication. Barriers are about communication. I think that's probably another piece of that secret wisdom. Mm-hmm. Make sure that the PCs know what they're getting into. Make sure that you warn them sufficiently when the barriers are strong. When you throw up those big barriers, keep in mind what kind of barriers are what. You don't throw campaign level barriers at PCs on a whim. You know, these are campaigns. Right? Yeah. You know, the bigger the barrier, the harder it is. Like the more difficult it should be to find them, if that makes sense. You know, smog only exists in that one mountain for a reason. You know, there's not a smog in every mountain, in every town, in every city, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And if there is in your setting for whatever reason, then that's part of your environment. And maybe that's an entire campaign all on its own too. Like
clearing the smogs.
Clearing out the smogs. Yeah. This episode's been a bit scattered, I think. But
yeah, a little bit.
But if someone were to listen to it and take notes, they could probably, fetch some wisdom about these episodes. Yeah. I'm almost tempted that we should have like someone chronologuing what we sort of say. But I think I've covered everything that I can think of about these sort of things. Make sure that they're visible, make sure that they're not too ridiculous. Like campaign level barriers shouldn't be just thrown around willy-nilly, and same with like session level barriers. Like not every, and maybe that's my problem, is almost every problem I throw at people is like a session level barrier, right? Yeah. Because think about it. Like almost every problem I throw like 2, 3, 4, 5 session level barriers at you guys. Like these are walls that you have to surmount, but every wall is like an entire session. Like sometimes 8 hours of playing to get over it. None of them. No, I never throw like hey boys, you want to pass your money over? I'll kill you. Because I always find that they're like a waste of time. And that's probably why my GMing style seems so brutal, because everything is a entire session to solve. Like everything is a Gordian knot that needs to take a couple hours to take out. It's never just where's the leader of the city? Whack! Now I'm the king.
Yeah.
There's always like way more complications. And if it is whack, I'm the king, the PCs start feeling real apprehensive because that's not the way I usually roll. So maybe that's something I got to work on as a GM. And like I said, I don't even think about these barriers, right? Like when I make this, if I had to answer the question, what's the way with to do it with the least amount of effort? It's literally just be mindful of all the things that you've written, your environment and things like that. And when you have to put things in, distill it. Don't write things down. If you have to write things down, like, because your barrier is part of the environment.
Yeah.
In your little environmental notes, just keep in mind of how how they're distilled into the environment, how things that you've made as barriers are interacting with the environment. You know how the great dragon at the center of town, because we're not going to use the 200, like something that can't distill into the town. There's now just a giant dragon in the center of town worth about 200 guys. You know how the town has sort of worked itself around this dragon.
Yeah.
You know, so like it's not going to be possible for you to just randomly walk into the town square of the town and see a dragon just like da 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 and just murder you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you have any closing remarks, anything like that you want to say?
I think we covered most of it. I think if you're building a barrier, like if you're putting forth the effort to like kind of go out of your way to build a barrier specifically for characters, keep in mind what they are and what they have available to them.
What the characters have available to them?
Yeah, because like if you're building a barrier that's really tall for a character that isn't designed towards that specific barrier, like you put a social challenge in front of the barbarian, like the barbarian's gonna have a
major social challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually a really good point, and that's something we should actually talk about briefly, like even to acknowledge that point. Yeah, when you're a GM and your party's a bunch of like fighters, essentially, like they're people who like the game is interested. Like the party's decided they want to be pirates that go around raiding ships.
Yeah, pirates doing pirate stuff.
Yeah, you're not gonna put some weird social situation involving a princess and her court. You know, you don't do that.
Yeah,
because all you've done is taken the pregame and you've turned it on its head and you said, oh yeah, we're not playing that kind of game. The players will stat up their characters as like specialists in whatever thing that they're interested in being that time, and to just turn around and then give them like epic level challenges in a completely different direction. It's like, you know, you've got a bunch of guys who's like, we're playing barbarians who came out of the barbarian tribe, and you're just like, okay, that's interesting. So you guys are going to have to make a lot of magic checks to see how much magic, like everything is going to involve magic. This will make it difficult for you guys, and you guys are interested in a difficult challenge. It's like, well, everything's magical. Everything is like super difficult to solve, and if you don't have high intelligence and an understanding of magic, you just can't win.
Yeah.
Like if that's what the barriers you're expecting, like if you put these kinds of barriers up, you need to be putting them up with the expectation that your PCs will never solve them. And if that's the kind of expectation, if you're putting up those barriers as like things that they're expecting to be able to solve, and you've made it so you can't solve them, you might as well just put up an invincible wall.
Yeah.
And just have them bang their swords against it for 3 hours. Because they'll sit there thinking about ways to solve this problem in the context of being a barbarian. And you'll have basically said that that's going to be impossible, but you won't tell them for like 4 hours. And your game will run a standstill, and it'll be stupid.
Yeah.
And likewise, the other way around, too, you know, looking at it the other direction, a bunch of guys who are like, we're going to play scholars who don't fight, you know? We're going to be guys who try to avoid combat or whatever. It's like, yeah, you do that, and then suddenly, you know, 100 biker gang guys, like, completely encircle them, and, like, a giant ogre in, like, freaking biker fatigues comes out with an axe, and he's just like, yep, you're going to have to fight this guy.
Yep.
It's like, well, this is an impossible challenge for a bunch of guys who've never fought in their life. Like, one guy, like, maybe tries to lift a sword and has trouble. You know, it's like, yeah, you've just killed that party. They'll sit there thinking about ways that they might be able to get away from that. And, you know, if you give them the time, if you don't, you're just going to butcher them. You're just like, oh, this is a butchery.
Yeah.
So when you, as a GM...
When you build a barrier, keep in mind what you're putting against the barrier.
Yeah, when you're building a barrier for the trail.
Yeah. Not
for the environment. Environmental barriers. If your PCs walk into the ganger hideout and they're like, we want to fight your greatest ogre because we've never experienced fighting before, or something stupid like that, like, sure, whatever. But if it's like, if you're expecting them to cross these barriers, if this is the trail you're hoping that they're gonna like travel along, or they've made it more acutely, they've made it known that that's where they want to go, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm barbarian A, I want to go to point C, right? And we're going to do this the barbarian way, and we expect to go over the hills or whatever. You know, you're not going to just randomly put up a bunch of weird barriers that don't make any sense to the game that they want to play. Or like if they're playing a pirate game, you're not just going to randomly put a bunch of, I don't know, caves that they have to get off their ship and then they have to start doing dungeon crawling.
Yeah.
It's like, stop, guys. Or like not even caves, like something else. I don't know. Something not the opposite of pirates, and don't say ninjas. Anyway, and that's something to definitely keep in mind. Don't put barriers. Like, keep an eye on what your party does. Like, this is why a pregame is important. So as long as you understand what your party is good for, you know, and if you do put challenges that go against their skill set, you know, make sure that they're either alternatives. That's a way to diffuse the challenge, or if there aren't alternatives, you know, try to make sure that it's like a solvable thing within their context. Unless this is the path they've chosen. Like if they've chosen the path of it's like, yeah, no, we're barbarians and we want to like solve this social issue. You know,
then that's their choice.
Yeah,
and they're deciding to do it.
Yeah, that's the same as saying, you know, you're going to jump into the pit. Give them some fair warning that this is going to be extremely difficult, whether, you know, in character or out of character, and then just let them have at it. And if they keep failing and they choose never to run, so be it. Yeah. But like, don't force them into that situation. Yeah. Which shouldn't be really an issue because D&D's kind of supposed to be a bit of a sandbox anyway. If you're forcing them to do something, you're probably already doing something wrong. Yeah. All right.
Like you said, make it their fault, not yours.
I'm hoping that we're gonna get the production schedule back on track. I think we're gonna move it to Tuesdays. Yeah. Tuesday night seems to be the way to go. I'm going to try to do more Let's Plays. I like doing them. They're fun, and it's kind of almost like a video journal. Might want to do that. And we're probably going to think of doing distilling these like 45-minute to an hour sessions into like a 10-minute kind of like Cliff Notes discussion about what people could do. So if people don't want to listen to a 1 hour discussion with a bunch of ums and ahs and us thinking about stuff, they can listen to the 10-minute one and sort of get the distilled energy, the distilled information from the podcast, and maybe get something valuable out of it. And if not, whatever. Maybe it'll help improve our metrics. Woo!
Oh boy,
it's exciting stuff.
Numbers.
Anyway, well, hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode. Next week, and it will be next week, we will be discussing distractions. Beware the quest giver. So this is probably going to be a discussion about side quests and adding barriers. Basically, this would be like little barriers that people throw up all over the place. You know, campaigns and other things, like extra campaigns that the PCs can go on. Yeah. How many choices is the right amount of choices? So hopefully you guys will tune into it. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. I don't get very many of those. It's pretty lonely out there in YouTube land. Yeah. But that's okay. And if you guys want to check out Cast is a pretty cool system. It's cast.org with hyphens between all the letters.
I think you should put a link in the description.
Maybe I will do something like that. That might be a good idea. All right. Well, everybody, you all take care and don't die.